Next up, we have Warlock, beginning with Mischievous Imp. 4 cost 3/3. In fact, 2 of them. Battlecry, summon a copy of this. Infuse 3, summon 2 copies instead. Warlock, obviously, is one of the classes that kind of naturally has, or tends to have, if you build a Zooish style deck, the ability to naturally build toward Infuse quite well. They have lots of things that make multiple things. They have lots of ways to, take advantage of those bodies with various sacrifice effects, things like that. So it's pretty easy to infuse, and if you do get this infused fairly quickly, say you play like turn 1, Wicked Shipment, turn 2, Thing, turn 3, those all die, boom, coin, 9 power, getcha. So I think that infuse kind of naturally does lend itself quite well to a Warlock Zooish style deck, which we haven't really seen much of recently. We've seen much more sort of control Warlock, or specifically the aggressive version that we have seen is more typically Murloc Warlock. But I do think that there is definitely a possible home for the infuse style stuff. I've really liked the sort of Death Rattle style Warlock with the Desecrated Graveyard, and maybe the infused stuff can build toward that direction as well. But speaking of locations and places like a graveyard, I always called their objectives. Desecrated Graveyard is an objective. This is a location, but this is Vile Library. Give a friendly minion +1/+1. Repeat for each imp you control. So imps, much like the Mischievous Imp we just saw, are one of the themes here for Warlock in this set. I assume that anything that has imp in the name counts toward imps, but this is potentially a very, very powerful effect. Again, one of the things that can be really problematic for playing a minion-based deck is the fact that opponent clears your board, kills your stuff, boom, it's gone. But this is a way to potentially reload and have a powerful reload because you play out a number of imps, like Mischievous Imp. Like, for instance, you play out your stuff, your opponent clears your board, you just have a Vile Library left, and you play Mischievous Imp. Boom, you have 3 Mischievous Imps, so you can have, a 7/7 and 2 3/3s off of that thanks to the Vile Library. So it's very, very powerful. I think that there's certainly something to be said for the sort of infuse imp library direction that we can explore in this set. Not an imp, a beast, Shadowborn. This is a 3 cost 3/3 Death Rattle. Reduce the cost of the highest cost shadow spell in your hand by 3. So this is kind of a weird one. This, there aren't that many, or at least haven't been that many, like really powerful proactive shadow spells that you'd want to necessarily reduce, at least leading up to this set. Things like Twisting Nether. Obviously, a deck that wants to play a 3 cost 3/3 wouldn't really necessarily want to reduce the cost of a Twisting Nether, though maybe. But one of the interesting things about this is that you can use it alongside Tamsin to make things more easily able to be comboed out with Tamsin, which could be a really powerful thing that it can give you like effects in sort of the mid game. Obviously, this also works with some of the curses because they are also shadow effects. Although reducing, say you have like Drag Below as one of your curses, that would actually make it unable to be used with Tamsin, so it's not necessarily as effective. But let's take a look at this one, Shadow Waltz. This is a shadow spell that can be reduced and be, actually pretty powerful proactively. A 5 cost spell, summon a 3/5 shadow with taunt. If a minion died this turn, summon another. So if you do have that Shadowborn that dies, this is a 2 cost spell that can summon 2 3/5 shadows with taunt. So more things that could potentially be used with Infuse as well. Individual cards that are summoning multiple things. And then we have Suffocating Shadows. When you play or discard this, destroy a random enemy minion. So we haven't really seen that much discard Warlock stuff lately, but this is a very, very powerful possible shadow effect. And one of the things that's worth noting is that some of the discard cards that did return are more controlled discard. That, for instance, Lakari Fellhound, which is a 4 cost 3/8 taunt, is now discard your 2 lowest cost cards. So you can actually control it such that when you decide to play it, it will be guaranteed to discard Suffocating Shadows and kill a random opposing minion. So that is a very powerful effect, and it also has a play effect rather than just a discard effect that does the same thing. So if you are looking to possibly kill individual large minions, that can be a very effective way of doing it. Next up, we have Impending Catastrophe, another shadow spell, but this one, draw a card, repeat for each imp you control. So obviously more of the imp theme with the mischievous imp. This can just by itself be 2 cost, draw 4, which is very very powerful. Not that Warlock necessarily needs that much help drawing cards. It tends to do that very well, but obviously hero powering is very slow, and you'd much rather get big bursts of resources with something like this. Next up we have Flustered Librarian, 1/3, +1 attack for each imp you control. Lots of things leaning into imps. This one itself doesn't actually interact with imps, but there are, many things that outside of this set that also are imp related. I believe Wicked Shipment, if I'm not mistaken, summons imps, or is it just demons? Wicked Shipment, I think it's just demons, actually. No, they are imps. Wicked Shipment also summons imps. So that's actually something which naturally has an incredible amount of synergy with the things that care about imps. Wicked Shipment into Impending Catastrophe, even if you haven't traded it, is by itself just like, basically an AI that makes 2 things. Obviously, you're spending 2 cards, but if you do start trading it, then you can suddenly summon tons of things, and you can, possibly lead yourself into being able to assemble like combos like Phylactery plus Tamsin plus Naval Mine or something like that, which you naturally are going to have things that you care about with the, or rather the imps that you care about because of the things like the spell here or the 1/3. Who cares about the imps? Now you have this one, Tome Tampering. Shuffle 1-cost copies of cards in your hand into your deck and then discard your hand. This is a really weird one. It's very cool. One thing this does is this can like very powerfully set up combos, right? If you're like, okay, I want to be able to do all this in one turn, boom, Tomb Tampering. You discard your hand, so you can't like follow this up with some big card draw thing, but you have life tap, right? You could potentially have death rattles that draw cards, things like that can enable you to be able to fire a lot of that off overall. So this feels like the sort of thing that's like can set up some sort of outrageous combo, but is not, obviously by itself doing anything particularly powerful. Next up, we have Lady Darkvein. Battlecry summon 2 1/1 shades. Each gains a death rattle cast your last shadow spell. So speaking of shadow spells, this could potentially get death rattle cast Tamsin's Phylactery. If you like Tamsin's Phylactery into some value thing, and then you cast this, boom, you get 2/1 shades that have death rattle cast Tamsin's Phylactery, or cast like curses. This is a very powerful card with curses, because one of the things that curses really wants is just the ability to continuously make spells that curse. Probably the most likely place it actually sees play is there. And then finally, Imp King Rafam. 6-cost, 6/6. Battlecry, resurrect 4 friendly imps, infuse 5, give your imps +2/+2. Obviously, lots of things that care about imps, and we'll want to go and look at like what all the various imp cards are in Standard. I haven't done like a deep dive into everything that is an imp, but between Imp King Rafam here, with buffing your imps with the infuse effect there, and the the card draw. This is the thing, the impending catastrophe that feels like one of the strongest things here is just 2-cost, draw, and then draw for every imp is just so powerful, right? So it feels like there's a lot of tools to enable you to really run over opponents with like early aggression, as well as buff your guys, reload. A lot of tools for the imp theme. It is a very impressive set of tools, and I gotta go take a shower because I feel dirty with all these puns. All right, and we have reached the final class in Murder at Castle Nathria, which is Warrior. And we shall start with the end of a saga that began long ago. Where is Mancrick's wife? She dead! Desmond Olgra. So for those who don't know, Murder Castle Nathria takes place in Castle Nathria, which is in the Shadowlands, which is the Death Realm, which is why here is poor Mancrick's wife. She's dead, but she's pretty beefy. She's a 6-cost 3/7, which incidentally is the stats that you get from Enraged Mancrick. Battlecry, gain +1/+1 for each damaged minion, then attack all enemies. So this is a very interesting card that, if your opponent has like a bunch of small things, can potentially kill all their small things. If they have a bunch of small damaged things, even better. And note that this is attack all enemies. This is not attack. Like all enemy minions. This hits your opponent's face. So if your opponent somehow has like, if you like Whirlwind and play her, and they have like 6 things in play, she comes down as a 9, 13, and can possibly just smash your opponent's face for 9. So, it's a sort of thing that can potentially, I imagine, have some sort of RNG element to it as to what it attacks first, because I imagine it will die, mid attack sometimes. If your opponent has large things, it might not hit in the face because it dies first. Might not necessarily attack everything and kill everything because it could die first. I assume it's random. If it's not random, I imagine it is in order played. Those are the two options that I imagine are possible. Either one could lead to not necessarily killing everything. Order played is how like Reckless Apprentice works, which actually weirdly means that if they have transformed into a hero after playing some of their stuff, it doesn't necessarily hit their face. But yeah, my guess is that it's random, and some people in the chat currently are saying that that is also the case. It feels like like a very interesting card to try and figure out when you want to use it. Obviously just as a like, hey, I play this and I kill like 2 small minions, it can just be powerful, right? Just in the the middle turns, your opponent has like 2 stealth minions, and you're like, okay, Olga, kill them. But it does specifically care about damaged minions, so the sort of a deck that does have things like Whirlwind or whatever can use this especially effectively. Speaking of Whirlwind type effects, this is one of my favorite cards in the set. It's obviously not a Whirlwind effect. Sanguine Depths, 1 cost, 1/3 location. Deal 1 damage to a minion and give it +1 attack. I have tried to make Frenzy style decks work so many times, and they rarely work. A big part of why they don't work is because you need to commit cards and mana to actually damaging your stuff, damaging their stuff, whatever. This is a 3-use way to trigger frenzy effects for no mana, or to hit your opponent's guys to damage them for effects that care about their opponent's things being damaged. It just does a lot that decks that care about damage stuff, matters, right? This is a great way to immediately trigger Acolyte of Pain, get an extra card, turn it into a 2/2. And then, okay, well, this is that becomes effective card draw because I don't have to worry about necessarily having a way to activate it immediately or just getting it killed right away. You can have multiple of these in play at the same time, right? It does take up a board slot, so it does reduce the amount that your Whirlwind Frothings can actually do. But be able to like immediately trigger like your Razormane Raider to hit your opponent in the face for 5. Be able to immediately trigger your like whatever the 4/8 guy is who kills a random opposing minion without having to spend mana or have like additional card invested. You can use this to activate 3 instances of frenzy and buff your guy. So I think this is actually a hugely valuable card for having any kind of frenzy deck work. I think this is the best card that has existed to potentially allow a frenzy deck to work. Whether they'll still work, I don't know, right? Still maybe too bad, but this I think is a super powerful tool for those decks before they rotate it out of standard like early next year. I'm super thrilled to have this card that will clearly bait me into making like at least a dozen more attempts at making frenzy decks, but hopefully they'll actually work this time. Next up, Riot. Riot, please. 2 cost spell. Your minions can't be reduced below 1 health this turn. They each attack a random enemy minion. So another actually pretty cool way to possibly use frenzy effects, right? Because this can it guarantees that they get hit. They hit something and they can't die, so their frenzy will go off. Like you can play this and then play like Olgra and blow up all your opponent's stuff. I guess it won't necessarily work because it will. This says your minions can't be reduced to one of its turns. So I think this will work with things you play afterwards. I think you could play Riot into Olgra. Olgra couldn't die; it would just keep attacking all their guys no matter what. But also like Riot into Frothing Berserker with Frothing Berserker in play. You cast Riot, Frothing Berserker hits them in the face, kills them. So I think this is like a really interesting way to have like a brawl type effect that you actually play in a minion deck. One of the problems with proactive warrior decks is frequently you fall behind even at all, and you're just like you're done for unless you have like insanely busted weapons like Deathbite or something. Because you really can't afford to play a brawl in a deck like that. You can play Riot, and see I'm getting blurry because I'm so excited about this card and all these cards in Warrior. Okay, I'm back. Hooray! So yeah, I think that this is a very cool card. I love this as maybe a 1 of, maybe even a 2 of, in a proactive warrior deck that wants to have something to deal with like your opponent playing a big board but doesn't want to just like wipe out their own board with an expensive card like Brawl that is terrible in a lot of instances. And this is the sort of thing that can activate all of your frenzy effects, can trigger your Frothing Berserker, can do all this stuff um, without actually killing your guys, and potentially wipe out your opponent's board as well. I feel like it's really, really has potential to be very strong. It also can be disgusting with Wild Pyromancer, much in the same way that Commanding Shout was. Obviously, it doesn't cycle in itself, but you can like play Riot with Wild Pyromancer and keep like playing spells with like Acolyte of Pain. I don't think it like when it's dealt damage when it's at 1, it'll draw you cards, but like that was like an old combo was the Commanding Shout, Wild Pyromancer, Acolyte of Pain to just keep drawing through and drawing through and drawing through and doing cool stuff like that. Won't work quite as well because it doesn't cycle it by itself and whatnot, but I think it's cool. Definitely going into my Frenzy decks that I'm guaranteed to try. Next up, Crazed Wretch. +2 attack and charge while damaged. Here's another card for my Frenzy decks. Hooray! Obviously works very well with the location. Turn 1, play the location. Turn 2, hit this. Boom, attacking for 4. You just have a 4/3 attacking on turn 2. And then you still have your location ready to go for later. Just another way to take advantage of those sort of self-damage effects and actually give you a way to finish the game. Next up, we have Burden of Pride. Summon 3 1/3 Jailers with Taunt. If you have 20 or less health, give them +1/+1. This is a weird card. This is obviously like a Magtheridon reference thing because it's the Jailers. I wonder if you have this with like Magtheridon and you kill these, whether your Magtheridon is freed. But this is kind of a strange card. It feels like maybe this is a way to like play like someone said it's not a Magtheridon reference. It looks like one. Either way, it's a weird card. Maybe you want to play like Infuse Warrior. You like use weapons, hit their stuff, and then you Burden of Pride to like make 3. I mean, 3 2/4s for 4 is actually like pretty good, but obviously having to set up for that is not that great. If there are like specifically infused things that you want to play, maybe that this actually works well in that. Maybe it's good if you're playing like a deck that only wants to play large minions for whatever reason, like recruit style stuff. Maybe it works there. But it doesn't really feel like there's that much in standard that pushes you in that direction. Next up, we have Conquerors Banner. Reveal a card from each player's deck 3 times. Draw any of yours that cost more. Well, speaking of Big Warrior, it's kind of a cool card. This can be like a draw 3 for 2 in Warrior. But obviously, even if you're playing like Big Warrior, you're going to have cheap support cards. So it seems like this is not necessarily an easy way to actually get it going. And I don't know. By itself, like, it's a 2-cost card that goes to your deck. It's going to be harder for you to actually get draws off if you ever hit itself. But Warrior, I mean, one of the issues that Warrior has historically had is it was always good at like cycling, but not necessarily drawing cards, or lots of things that like, would like replace themselves. It wouldn't necessarily net more cards. That has not been the case recently. There's like Outrider's Axe, Forged in Flame. I feel like there's a lot of pretty powerful tools for Warrior to generate additional resources to draw more cards. So that feels like, as a conditional card draw, because I could literally draw 0, right? That could literally be a draw 0. Feels tough to really justify over some of the other stuff that's already there. Next up, we have Suspicious Pirate. The Suspicious cards are very cool. This one is a 3/4 for 3, and it's a pirate, so both those things are relevant. Battle card, discover a weapon. If your opponent guesses your choice, they get a copy. This feels like probably one of the weaker of the Suspicious cards, both because it is more expensive, right? As a 3-cost 3/4, but it is a pirate, so the pirate synergies that do exist in Warrior can be pretty relevant for the likelihood of this seeing play. The discover a weapon, I feel like there's not really that many different weapons. It's probably pretty likely that you'll get it because like there's only so many weapons and you can just choose like a mid-tier weak one if you really want the weapon. But then like, do you really want to get the weapon? It feels like it feels like the gap between the different weapons is much bigger than like the gap between necessarily like legendary minions. Maybe that's not true. Maybe I'm just kind of making that up. But your opponent can also just like use the weapon right away and get an immediate effect from it, which is not necessarily true of like a minion you might discover. I don't know. This feels like probably the least impressive of the Suspicious cards to me. But simply the fact that it is a pirate and can fit into like quest or whatever or other pirate synergy stuff may make it more likely to see play. But overall, it does not seem super impressive to me. Next up, we have Anima Extractor. Speaking of Frenzy type decks, whenever a friendly minion takes damage, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. I didn't even see this before I just opened it here. Now this is a Frothing Berserker deck card. Oh man, this card is sick. You can play like, there's like not only, just the natural charge things you can play like Mr. Smite or Grom or whatever, But this card seems insane. Like this with like, there's the Frenzy guy who whirlwinds and then frenzies to whirlwind again. And then like, this card just seems nutty. What? Holy cow. Yeah, I think this card is nuts. I think this card is quietly insane. Like, any kind of whirlwind type effect with this can just make absolutely gigantic minions, right? Like, one of the issues with like the, you know, frenzy style decks is like the payoffs you're getting for them are typically, you know, they're isolated to the things in play. And if your opponent clears your board, great, they cleared your board, now you're wrecked. This is not like a pretty difficult minion to kill because it's a 1/4 for 2. So they're unlikely to be able to, you know, clear it before you get some effect from it. And like, if you're able to whirlwind with this in play with like 3 or 4 minions, that's like, okay, well now I have like +4/+4 across my board. Then they have to actually kill your stuff, which gives you another like plus, you know, whatever across your board. This seems really powerful to me. This actually seems like a card that might make it worth playing like the objective, the what is it, Iron Blood Garrison or whatever, that whirlwinds at the end of your turn. That was another card that was really awkward because like you wanted to be able to actually have the whirlwind effect go off, like, and then be able to use the things that got whirlwinded. But yeah, this seems like the sort of thing like this hitting like Olgra, right? So she's massively hand buffed too. Yeah, I think this card is nuts. I think this is like, I didn't even see this card and I was already excited about playing Frenzy Warrior. And now that's probably like my day one first deck is Frenzy Warrior with this guy. Seems sick. Next up, speaking of things that care about damage, after your hero attacks, give your damage minions +1/+1, infuse 3, +2/+2 instead. Oh god. Oh, my whirlwind stuff. Oh my god. Let's go. Look at this. It's a 3-cost 2/3 weapon that bare minimum attack, give your guys +1/+1 that are damaged. Infuse +2/+2. This is like, these are so powerful. Frenzy Warrior, we're doing it. Imbue them, infuse them, let's go. And then, speaking of powerful things to buff in your hand, Ramornia Living Blade. So this here is a crazy card. Ramornia is a 7-cost 4/10 minion. After this attacks, equip it. And it turns into this, Ramornia Living Blade. After hero attacks, return this to the battlefield. So let's say, hypothetically, you have that Anima Extractor card, and you whirlwind a board of like 5 guys twice. So you get +10 on this. So you have yourself a 14/20 minion that attacks and turns into a 14 power weapon. And then you smush them and they die. This is so cool. Ramornia is just an awesome card. So it just sort of swaps, you know, you like, if you think your opponent's gonna have like mass removal, you can leave it as a weapon and then like make them use their mass removal, then attack with your weapon the next turn, get the Ramornia back, attack with it again, just leave it as a weapon. It seems really cool. Obviously this is extremely, because like this, for those who don't necessarily know, this keeps its stats as it changes forms, right? So if it gets hand buffed, right? If this becomes like a 10 power thing in your hand, it is a 10 power weapon when it turns into a weapon. If it takes damage as a minion, it loses durability as a weapon, and vice versa. If it loses durability when you attack, it loses health as a minion. You cannot attack rush infinite because your hero can only attack once per turn. But you can rush this into something, I believe, turn it into a weapon, attack with the weapon, rush again, because it's a different object, or maybe it's the same object so it can't attack again. I would assume, actually, now that I think about it. I assume because it says return this to the battlefield, so it's like the same object, it doesn't necessarily get 3 attacks, it only get 2 attacks, or maybe it can actually get 3 attacks because it has rush, so it came back into play, but it's already attacked, but it did transform into the weapon, so I don't know. My guess is it can, because it changes into the minion after being the weapon, so it could probably attack again. That's my guess. But regardless, this card is sick. It's super cool, and I think it's actually very, very powerful too. It is not that powerful without support in some way. As we were mentioning, that Anima Extractor thing seems real powerful and really good at buffing, say, a Living Blade that you can then make your opponent not living with very, very quickly. So yeah, overall, the warrior cards in this set are very cool. I have been, like I said, working to try to make some form of frenzy self-damage warrior work for a very long time. And there are some of the best cards for that strategy ever in this set. I think quietly, this is actually like the most important one, the Sanguine Depths, in order to actually be able to trigger things without spending additional mana, having one card that can trigger multiple instances of frenzy, super, super, super valuable. And then obviously the like powerhouse cards, the Anima Extractor, and the sort of role players of the charge guy, along with of course the really heavy hitter of Ramornia, supported by the various buff effects, all lead toward a really, really cool version of Frenzy Warrior that I am super excited to play with. So that is almost certainly the very first deck that I'm going to build on day one of the expansion is Frenzy Warrior, because it is finally its time. I really hope I won't be disappointed. I don't think I will, and I don't think you will either.